Hey, I'm McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in.
Brian and I are so excited to introduce to you our new sponsor, Lakeview Health. They are a wonderful residential treatment center. Whether it's the family member who is looking for a place or the addict or alcoholic themselves, this would be the place that we would refer them to. Brian, you have many years of experience with Lakeview.
Yeah, Lakeview Health is a center of excellent addiction treatment. They take an evidence-based approach, medical approach to treating this complex brain disease. They hold the Joint Commission's Golden Seal, and they were voted one of America's best treatment centers by Newsweek magazine. They deliver dual diagnosis, gender-responsive, and trauma-informed care at their gorgeous facility here in Jacksonville, Florida. But they do see people from all over the world do come here to Jacksonville to go to treatment at Lakeview. Their levels of care include medically supervised detox, which a lot of people do need. Then they stabilize them in a residential rehabilitation and partial hospitalization program. They have board-certified physicians, master-level therapists, and they work to address the unique needs of each patient. So in other words, it's not a cookie-cutter program. They help individuals build skills for long-term sobriety. So if you or someone you know needs treatment, please visit their site at lakeviewhealth.com. We also have a hyperlink on our website at familyandaddictionexperts.com where you can just click and get some information about Lakeview Health. And Di, I think you have a number for people to call if they would like to inquire about treatment.
I sure do. That number is 888-480-3799. That's 888-480-3799. Give them a call. Hey everybody, I'm Di McQueen with Healing Families Shattered by Addiction podcast, joined by my favorite guy, Mr. Brian or Dr. Brian Jackson. Hey B, how you doing?
Hey, good, Di. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much.
2 podcasts in a row together.
I know. We don't do it all the time, but I think it's pretty cool. It's a great way to start off the year. Today we thought we would talk about helping people understand if and when it might be appropriate to walk away from the addict. And, this is a really touchy subject. And I thought, again, there's no real right or wrong. And I think that's really an important one to stress, that nobody can tell somebody when it's right or wrong to do that. However, we might give some guidelines on, what might make sense. It's never, at least from both of our vantage points, it's never an easy decision to make. But at some point, people may come to what we call their breaking point. And I think everybody has a different feeling about what that might look like for them and, how hard it is, getting really, this is a very, very difficult decision to make. But we thought, we might help people with understanding what some of this guilt and shame, there's so much intertwined in what this might look like that we might be able to help with some of the confusion around it. So we thought we might start there, right? Because it's very complex and it's difficult. So starting with, we thought we'd start with some of the reasons why people don't walk away and help them understand why it makes sense that, we get it. There's pros and cons to all of those things. And then we'll sort of move it into when and if people might want to. So of course, there's always that first thing that people are afraid they won't make it on their own, right, B?
Yeah, I mean, there's this, sometimes it's really hard to think about walking away from a loved one who is in the midst of their addiction. And some people won't even like entertain the thought. However, there is times where you really get to a breaking point for a lot of family members. It's almost like you feel paralyzed. You don't know what to do. So, we're not here to tell you what to do, but we certainly can share some experience that we've had with family members as to why they are reluctant to leave, and try and give you some rationale on maybe that might be a decision that's an option to you. So
Yeah, the first thing is, really that we're afraid. We're like afraid, really, literally afraid that they can't make it on their own.
yeah, it's like, if I don't want to leave them on their own, what's going to happen to them if you know we kick them out of the house? They're something's going to happen to them bad, because of their use. But the reality of it is that, if they continue to use in your house, something bad could happen as well. So it's like the addiction goes with them no matter where they are. And sometimes it can send a signal to the addict or alcoholic that you're very serious about this and that their behavior has had an impact on the family to the negative, that maybe it's time for them to take a look at themselves instead of pointing the finger at everybody else, maybe point the finger at themselves, um, in an honest frame of mind and say, wow, um, this may have really gotten out of hand because, mom and dad, have said they've had enough.
Right, and actually, in reality, sometimes, we think that, they can't make it on their own, but in fact, what we've been doing is enabling them by letting them stay, or, we justify it and use that little denial, natural defense mechanism that we have, that by they can't make it on their own, we really are supporting something that's really not good. We continue to help that person when in fact, we're not helping that person. So,
Yeah, I mean, really what you're doing is enabling them.
yeah,
And they know that they always have your support and will continue, in their habit. Eventually, they begin to depend, on others and no longer, on themselves. And, we see family members where they set a clear boundary, like, if you continue to do this, you're going to have to move out. And they continue to do it. And then they're not asked to move out. So people will not change what you will tolerate. So the message there is, no matter what I do, there aren't going to, that is not going to be a consequence for me. So it's really important that, you follow through, on whatever boundaries that you do set. Um,
right. Another reason why people don't feel like it's okay for them to, that they can't make it necessarily, or why we don't finally say to them that they can't make it on their own, right? Or we don't send them away, is because we feel like it's our job to fix them. I certainly know for me, that was a big one, right? Like somehow I need to fix this problem. It is my fault. There's something that I must be missing. There's something else I could do if I just love them more, if I were able to come up with another plan of action, if I could only get into their pain a little bit more, if I could just help them understand what it is that they are doing to themselves, but to all of us, it would help make it better or different. But reality is what?
yeah, I mean, this goes back to the old saying, sink or swim. A lot of times, when families do decide that they've had enough and the person has to move out, they're in a position then that, they're not going to get the financial support that they got before to enable them to, um, subsidize their addiction. They're really faced at a crossroads for themselves, in terms of having to make some changes. And we hear it a lot, and I think I just mentioned it, is that you feel that it's your job to fix them. Um, and addiction is an illness, it's a disease. If it was as simple as people being able to just stop, a lot of people would attempt to do it. Unfortunately, it takes a lot more than that. It takes counseling, it takes maybe some medication assisted treatment. It is a progressive disease that needs to be managed.
So, a lot of times we see people who are in the midst of their addiction and intellectually they know they would like to stop, but physically it's nearly impossible for them to stop because of the withdrawal symptoms. And so the physical craving, the mental obsession that goes along with that, um, really needs to be addressed by a professional. And that's our hope always, is that the person in their substance use disorder will seek some sort of help. And, you're not a doctor. Some of you may be doctors, but it's very hard for a family member to try and fix an illness that needs to be addressed by professionals. And quite frankly, you're not going to fix it.
Exactly. And here's another thing that always comes to my mind that really was a big one for me, B, which was, there's this connotation that what's the distinction of how do I love them, right? And people think if I'm not doing these things for them, it's showing them I don't love them. And that is actually not true at all. Some of the best love you can give them is tough love. Or even just letting them know that me taking care of me doesn't mean I don't love you. And I can love them from a distance. Sometimes I have to love them from a distance. But there is confusion, especially in codependent relationships, right? We get very muddled in what that word means. And, addicts and alcoholics are masters at figuring out how to get you twisted on that and how to convince you that you're being an awful person or they've got you all messed up in your head about what that means. So again, as Brian and I both just pointed out, it is not your job to fix them. It is almost impossible for you to fix them. As a matter of fact, it is impossible for you to fix them. So I think, it's one of those things where when you start to feel that, you better go get some help yourself, and really recognize that. You got to make sure that they aren't convincing you they got this. They got this all under control, right? They got this.
Well, and then the other point that you made is that because you ask them to leave or you leave, doesn't mean that you don't love them. It's just so important that you continue to love them, but like I said, you can love them from a distance. Mm-hmm. So you're detaching with love. The interpretation of the loved one may be, oh, you're being mean, you don't love me anymore, you don't like me anymore. But in fact, what you're doing is an act of love to try and help them, take a look at themselves without the training wheels or guardrails, if you will, of being enabled by their family members, which makes it a lot easier for them to continue in their addiction because they have what they need, and a lot of times we give them what they need because we love them, and we do it and say, oh my gosh, what am I doing? How do I stop this? And continue in that kind of cycle of continuing to enable them because you don't want them to feel like you don't love them.
Exactly. Which, again, leads sort of into the next, comment that I made, which was really about, how the addict or alcoholic will believe that they have this disease under control, right? And that is part of the mind altering part of this disease, which is, I really do have this under control. I know you're worried about me, but don't. And that's part of what this disease does to our brains because it elicits that feeling of, I really need you guys to relax and don't worry about this. I've got it. And in fact, it's not even close to the truth, right?
No, and so families have hope, and it's hope that, oh my goodness, okay, they do have it under control. And it's almost wishful thinking because I've been doing this for a long time, and a person that has an alcohol use disorder or a substance use disorder that thinks or has the delusion that they can cut back on their use and drink like quote unquote normal people. I don't know that there's any normal people, but drink like most people. My experience has been not 90% of the time, not 95% of the time, 100% of the time, because this is a progressive illness, that the loved one that's using will always return to the level that they were using at or more. And, we can have a whole nother podcast on that in terms of the way a person with an alcohol use disorder illness or substance use disorder illness metabolizes alcohol and drugs different than a person who does not have the disorder. So if you look at somebody with diabetes and you don't have diabetes, that person with diabetes metabolizes sugar differently than you do. And it's very much it's a good analogy, and it's right on point that um, people with an alcohol use disorder or substance use disorder metabolizes the medication or the drugs and the alcohol differently than a person who does not have the disorder. So we really need to think of this as a progressive um, disease that can end up with a lot of physical consequences that are a direct result of the use.
Exactly. And here's, it's what's really interesting to me, and I can remember this so distinctly while I was going through it personally, was, the hope for things getting better. There's that constant hope. And it was amazing how, like, my brain would actually, you'd have 2 or 3 good days and you'd be like completely blindsided.
Yeah, everything's good now.
Everything's
good.
fine. Everything's perfect. Okay. Whatever was going on for the last, 10 years just was not happening. And you'd forget, and then you like somehow you would like so shocked, and like almost lambaste you. You'd fall off your chair, going like, "How did this happen again?" I go, "This is where it's really so amazing to me how quickly we all have hope, which is a great thing."
Sure, absolutely.
Except it's not. It can be. At times not.
Well, it results in what we talk about a lot is that betrayal trauma.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I've stopped, and now the whole family, everybody's excited, and hey, things are turning around, and then there's a relapse.
Right.
And so the trust goes away again, and there's a lot of guilt and shame on the part of the person who was trying to stop. And again, if people could do this on their own, they would.
That's right.
And this is an illness that needs to be treated.
However, in saying that, I also go, one of the things that you and I are really famous for and people love about us is we never give up hope on anybody.
Oh, no, there's no hopeless cases. I
No,
promise you, there's no hopeless cases.
No, for sure. And we just don't give up. So I go, but it's hard when you're within the family nucleus. It is very difficult at times. And sometimes you need to walk away. That doesn't mean you give up. It means you walk away, right? And you're taking care of yourself. Big difference, right? Between giving up hope, because your hope is, I believe in them. They will come through. And you do that with various tools and techniques that we've talked about and things like that. But that doesn't mean the disease gets better on its own, right? Like they have to do their part. So, in saying that, I go like, okay, let's talk about some of the truisms about addiction, right? Which is, first of all, family members, addiction isn't your fault, right? I mean, society makes you go like, somehow we have this stigma about, what did families do? Or is there, the blame has to go somewhere. And I'm like, no, I don't believe that to be true. Do you?
Yeah, but I mean, I think sometimes it's like it's so out of control. It's almost like if you put your finger on it, whether it's real or imagined, like, okay, it must be my fault. In some ways, it gives people like, okay, that's what it is. So therefore,
Makes you
we
feel a
pay
little
for
better,
it
I guess.
because
However,
it's so chaotic.
right.
I mean, it's just so chaotic. And back to leaving or deciding to leave, if you think about it for however long you've been doing, one of the sayings we have, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting,
Right.
meaning nothing is really changing. So how do we strategize to do something as painful as it may be and as fearful as it may be, that could be really an opportunity for everybody to get better? Some of the best gifts we get wrapped given or kind of wrapped in crappy paper, but sometimes those gifts come from making tough decisions that normally are not in your in your mindset.
I mean, I kind of joke around about it sometimes because the truth is it's never our fault, but we don't cause it, we can't control it, we don't cure it, but some of the actions and reactions we have do contribute, right? So we have to sometimes like learn what those things are so we can get away from that. And that is what B's talking about here. Again, we can't fix it. We can't, but we can provide support. right? With boundaries, with, these are the things I need from you to give you the support that I need, right? Or that we are willing to do for you. And that, again, is going to be different for each and every family or specific family members. And, everybody that is in an addictive world needs a support network, especially to get better. Regardless if it's the family or otherwise, people need support. So what you can do is provide support in different ways, but I think a lot of people need guidance on what that support looks like. Don't you agree, B?
Yeah, and it was not your choice that, your loved one has not received help for their substance abuse. So not only are you taking responsibility for the fact that they started out using alcohol and drugs, um, why have they not, gone and sought some help? But like Di said, love and support can come in many forms, but the form we don't want it to come in is that, okay, the way I'm going to love them is continue to turn a blind eye to what's going on here, continue to provide financial support to and make it easy for them, give them a free place to live, not holding them accountable, just accepting this as this is the way it's going to be. So, you know, you can be there when they need emotional support. You know, there's all kinds of things that you can do that are healthy ways to support your loved one that does not involve, excuse me, enabling and helping the illness to continue to go on.
Right. And really understanding, I think B has said it probably 2 or 3 times through this little podcast, that this is a progressive disease. And one of the things we always strive to do is educate on what does that look like. So that would be another thing that I would highly recommend, and we highly recommend, is that you educate yourself on the disease of addiction and really start to understand what does that mean and what does that look like. Because given the understanding of it, it often changes the way that we look at this thing. Someone's not doing this to us. They have this entity that they really can't help, but there are things that can be done to make it better or worse for our family members. And it is progressive. It meets the criteria of the DSM-5, and that's really important to understand that it is a disease factor, but that does not necessarily mean that there aren't things that you as family members can or cannot do. So we recommend get educated, right? Get educated, and then we can move into other things.
Yeah, and I'd like to, break it down as simply as the American Society of Addiction Medicine describes it. They describe it as addiction is a primary chronic disease of the brain, reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Substance abuse usually starts as a way to not feel emotions. So the release of dopamine in the brain gives the addicts the reward they feel as a euphoric experience. So it's been our experience that most people who develop a problem, either by genetic predisposition or however, if they've been at it long enough that it's become, a physical maintenance thing, are in some form of pain. And the pain typically is 8 out of 10 times some sort of emotional pain. And so the alcohol or drugs helps separate them from what they're feeling. And it's a way to change the way we're feeling. So, the drinking and drugging is but a symptom of something else. Usually when we peel back the layers of the onion, there are things underneath there that need to be addressed. And so that's really, really important to remember, is that drinking and drugging is typically a symptom of something else. And a lot of people that we see, it's depression, it's anxiety, could be childhood trauma, could be an adult child of an addict or an alcoholic. And that's really where we need to get to the meat and potatoes of what is going on with the person. And in order to do that, we need to put some time and distance between the last time they used and actually see what's going on, and hope that they are open and willing to explore some of the things that can be addressed and looked at and healed through therapy, or working with other people or being around other people that are in recovery.
Right. So that was a really long-winded way for us to get to, but we wanted to explain that those parts to you to get to the answer that we feel is, when really should you walk away, right?
Mhm.
So, but we felt it was very important to explain most of those things, but we want to explain those. So when do we walk away? It's really when we have to get to that place of we have to put ourselves first. If in fact, we have, substance abuse is contradictory, right, to a situation, but it's key for us to make sure that we understand if I'm not able to put myself in front of this disease that keeps getting in the way of my life, if there's domestic issues or anything like that, I have to decide that I come first, which is very difficult, especially for the codependent enablers. For other family members, maybe sometimes it's with the child. Anyway, if I have to become, someone that needs to heal, etc., I have to do that. And that is a time when I may make a decision to walk away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer if there's any type of violence, physical, absolutely, it's time to walk away. Emotional abuse can just become so wearing on you, and as a family member, you see the progression happen, and you may witness your loved one change in ways you never could have imagined. It's almost like their personalities have completely changed in the way they treat you and the way they interact with you. But again, it's a very personal decision, but I have seen it and I have seen it where really that is a solution in a lot of cases,
Right.
As opposed to what we've been doing for so long, which hasn't been working.
Right. And even if it's temporarily, I mean, we
Right,
can
yeah,
have
not
someone,
permanent, yeah.
I mean, we don't mind. We go safety first always, right? Even if it's a temporary, I pack my bag, I go for a few days, I let things calm down. I do whatever that is because we are not the judge and jury of what works best for you. However, abuse of any kind, mental, physical, emotional, sexual, unacceptable. And yeah, as Bryce said, when people are on chemicals, they are not necessarily them, the person that we know. I call it the twins. I make a joke about it a lot. That we have two people inside of there. And unfortunately or fortunately, when the evil twin comes out, it can be very scary. And I experienced that myself, where there was a lot of violent moments, and it's terrible. So you have to take care of yourself, and it's not about, oh, I can handle this. You get safe. And that's what you do. You don't have to, make excuses for that. You really just have to take care of yourself. And there's a lot of ways we can go through all of that on how you have to do that. But, that's something that we could talk about. We're always here to talk to people about those situations. Don't ever put yourself in a place where you allow yourself to be hurt.
Yeah, and what happens with the progression of addiction as this happens, the progressions of unwanted behaviors will begin. So everything about addiction is progressive. So some of the things that you're seeing in terms of changes in personality and behavior to the negative will continue as they continue to stay in their addiction and use more and more. And the brain is basically hijacked. Not an excuse, but a lot of times they don't know what they're doing. It's totally out of character for them.
Right. And what you think this person's always been the sweetest, kindest person ever. Yeah, don't think that that's, predictable anymore, especially as it progresses. And depending on what kind of drug or whatever they're on, you have to really go like, I cannot accept anymore that might be my person anymore in their cups. I call it that way. I go, who might be when they're not, you're in a different situation. Really important to think about when I have to stand by my decisions, which is if I set a boundary with them, and I tell them that if this continues, I'm going to have to, move across the way, or you're going to have to move out, or whatever it is that you decide to do. Holding your line is extremely important. So that might be a time when you have to walk away, or you ask them to walk away. Either or, it's really important that you go, if I tell them this is my boundary, then it's absolutely necessary that you follow through, or you just lost whatever credibility you had.
Yeah, people will not tolerate. I mean, people will not change what you will tolerate.
Exactly. We teach people how to treat us.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, walking away, as hard as it sounds, does not mean you don't love them. It may mean that you're getting some love and respect for yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to leave forever. The hope is that the loved one is going to get some help.
Exactly. So I go, it's really, really important. You know, their actions speak louder than words, right? Whatever it is that they, you know, the endless promises or whatever it is that has been going on for a long period of time. And again, each family member has to decide for themselves. You know, it may be different for a child that's living 2,000 miles away, right, than it is for the person living at home. So we make a really clear distinction that, you know, everybody has to do what works appropriately for them, except in the cases where we believe, right, Bride, that if you're in the same household, you better get on the same page about this.
Yeah, because one just run from one person to the person that's going to say yes.
That's exactly right. And believe me, there's nobody more in tune with how to work everybody than the addict in their cups, right? Like they know exactly what to say to so and so and so and so and so and so to start having everybody fight with everybody and get the whole chaotic world going so that we get exactly what we want. Everybody else is mad and what's going on? I didn't do anything. What are you talking about? Like I'm the innocent one here. No, they usually are the people that have started the whole rigmarole so that we get the deflection off of me and onto everybody else. So, you know, Brian and I recommend that if you're in the same household, the family comes up with what is the plan. And, you know, if you're, you know, kids or parents or whatever living miles and miles away, you get to decide for yourself what works for you and how you're going to do it.
Yeah, the bottom line is we don't want you to be a prisoner of addiction. Obviously, the person that's using is a prisoner of the alcohol and drugs, but, you know, addiction affects the family in so many ways that it's even more frustrating, I think, sometimes to family members. But, you know, don't give your life up to addiction. Doesn't mean you don't love your
That's right.
family.
That's right. And it doesn't ultimately mean I'll never see this person again.
Right.
Right. So remember, discretion and ask for help, right? Go see your counselor, come see your coach. We're here.
Yeah.
Or whoever.
Yeah. And one of the things that you said earlier is like people will tell you, well, I'm going to stop, I'm going to cut back, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It doesn't happen. And so therefore, you know, you don't believe a word they're saying anymore. And sometimes you can just throw your hands up and give up. What we're really looking for here is an outward sign of an inward change. That's where the hope comes for family members. When the loved one takes the step and you see the step, i.e., to go to treatment or to talk to a counselor or say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. Will you take me wherever? So I'm a big believer if they're doing something that's beneficial to them, that's going to be helpful to help them get healthy. I think it's important for family members to support that. But if they're doing something to destroy themselves and destroy the family, it's real important not to support that on any level. But you can continue to love them. What we're looking for is that change that we can all see. Doesn't matter. We've heard them say it forever. So, and you know, I was one of those people. I'm not laughing about it. I'm laughing with it because it is hard to make that change for the person who has an addiction. And, you know, 23 years later, it's probably the best decision I ever made in my life. So,
Right. So a few tips on when to think about potentially walking away. Okay. And we're around. Okay. Give us a chance if you need, or if you need some information, look at some free resources, etc. We're here for you guys, and we'll see you soon on our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ty.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.